Well, I am going to go ahead and welcome everyone to tonight's online community forum where we are going to talk about coronavirus and how it's impacting our community. Tonight especially, we're going to focus on COVID-19 and mental health, and we have a variety of very intelligent guests with us tonight. I am Twina Nobles, President and CEO of Tacoma Urban League, and shortly we will be joined also by Pam Duncan, the President and CEO of Metropolitan Development Council. And we are partnering for this series of conversations. Also with us tonight to facilitate this conversation is Amanda Westbrook. Amanda, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm okay. That's how I am, and very honored to be here and to spend this next hour and a half just listening and learning, because we have so much to get through. Tonight's conversations, Twina, is the 8th in a series of discussions where we are diving into different ways that the virus is impacting Tacoma and Pierce County. Tonight, our panel will dig into how COVID-19 and the ongoing impacts of systematic racism during this pandemic are having an impact on our collective mental health. We will be here for the community throughout COVID-19 crisis with new conversations every Monday at 5 p.m.
Thank you. And I want everyone to know that the most important message throughout this series is that there is hope for our community. Our focus is to create a space in each meeting, every time we talk, to create a space to talk about resources and things that we can all be doing to get through this pandemic. Throughout today's conversation, you can submit questions to be addressed by our speakers using the question and answer function in Zoom. We cannot promise that we will have time to consider every question, but we will make our best effort to get through the list in our allotted time. So thank you all so much for being here.
And as a housekeeping matter, and for the security of everyone on this call, everyone's microphone has been muted. And we are not allowing people to share their faces on the video. We have also, as Twina said, disabled the chat function. So please submit your questions to our moderator through the Q&A function. So our panel for tonight's conversation includes Dr. John Castile of Castile Williams and Associates. He is an MDC board member. Welcome, Dr. Castile. There he is. Darylyn Harris. Hello, Darylyn.
Hello.
She is the facility counselor at Highline Community College. Thank you for being here.
Faculty counselor.
Thank you for that, faculty counselor. Stephen Primus, there you are up in the corner with your Black Fathers Matter t-shirt on. He is a life coach at Always Coaching and adjunct counselor at a number of local community colleges, and also is on the faculty for our School of the Arts, known as SODA, here in Tacoma. And then joining us a little bit after 5:30 will be Tony Williams of Tony Williams Coaching and Counseling Services, LLC. All right, Twina, should we jump in?
It is time to jump in. Thank you, Amanda.
Welcome.
So I would like to, I'm like, were you waving at me?
Waving at you and Pam, she's on.
Oh, hey, Pam.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I apologize for the delay.
No problem. Pam, perfect timing. Just thought it would be great to do a quick temperature check. And, you know, Amanda, you can do this too, but I think it's pertinent to make sure we know how all of our guests, you know, those of us as hosts, I think it's important to take a moment to just share how we are doing. We're all really good. We're professional people and really good at not even thinking about the question when asked, you know, how are you? And we're just, you know, good, you know. But I think we should just take a minute to check in, and I don't mind starting. So I am Twina Nobles, President and CEO of Tacoma Urban League. And honestly, the past week, especially since the last time we had this conversation, It has been very emotional, very busy. I mean, here in Tacoma, this community is grieving the loss of Manuel Ellis here in Tacoma, and working hard to ensure that there is accountability for our local police department. And on top of that, grieving all of the losses we've experienced across the nation more recently, and just throughout the history of this country and its ugly racist culture. So it's been a very demanding week, supporting community members who are hurt. And it also has been a very overwhelming week because there are lots of folks, younger, older, various ethnic and racial backgrounds and professional experiences or educational experiences who want to be a part of the movement. I'm grateful that I work for Tacoma Urban League. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is 365 in our organization. So it's not an event or a place that you show up to. It's something that lives in your heart. And so that is our mission. But we have an especially important role right now to provide resources and to support the community and to provide outlets and information for folks who want to know what they can do now. Because I do believe you meet people where they are. And if someone is just getting to, I understand and I want to take action, then Tacoma Urban League is a type of organization that wants to meet them there and help them to be successful. So I'm grateful for the number of folks who have become members. I'm grateful for the number of individuals who have reached out to check on me, my friends who've checked on me, just to make sure I'm okay. Grateful for folks who are courageous enough to organize protests and to get out and protest, and all the folks who have used a variety of ways to demonstrate activism, to be strong and vocal and to communicate a sense of urgency right now. Lots of folks have said this feels different. This feels different. And I agree. So I am here and accounted for, but my heart is broken for this country, for this community. I am still motivated and committed to doing my part.
Thank you, Twina. Pam Duncan, Miss President and CEO of Metropolitan Development Council. How are you doing this week? And how are you right now?
I am like my brothers and sisters. I am doing as well as I can given the circumstances. The emotions range from numbness to anger on the scale of, I just can't believe this is happening or has happened yet again, to a whole depth of feelings that I am still processing through, to be fully transparent. 8 minutes and 46 seconds is a very, very, very long time. And I'm committed to using the voice and the position and the power that I have and that we have collectively to make certain that there's not another 8 minutes and 46 seconds or 2 minutes or a minute. Like my sister Twina said, what I'm hearing too is that this feels different. I pray that it is a permanent difference. Thank you for asking. You are one of those folks, friends, allies who has constantly checked in on me, Amanda, and I appreciate that.
Well, I love you and Twina to the moon and back, and that's what friends do for each other when their hearts are broken. Yeah. Darylyn, I want to check in with you and do a little temperature check. How are you doing as this new week begins?
I share a lot of sentiments as Tawana and Pamela. I have, I'm exhausted, to be exhausted emotionally, mentally, physically, and trying to be real intentional on taking care of my own body, taking care of myself, and giving myself that space to actually just be. And that's been helping me, but just exhausted and not surprised. I do feel like things are, it feels a little different, and we'll probably, talk about that a little more later, but I'm just tired of being tired. So,
Yeah.
thanks for asking.
Thank you for telling. Stephen, how are you today? And how are you doing with this Monday after all?
Well, I'm feeling both frustrated and hopeful at the same time. Frustrated in the sense that we didn't get it after Emmett Till. We didn't get it after Rodney King. We didn't get it after Eric Gardner. We didn't get it after Kaepernick. And now it takes George Floyd for something to happen. To hear all these politicians or people in power saying, we know white supremacy and we know this and we know that. So if we knew all this, why haven't we done anything about it? That's my frustration in knowing that how this country was built and systematically was built to hurt Black people and people of color. And to know all of that, now we're just now like bringing that to the forefront. It's frustrating, but the hopeful part is to watch our youth that say, we're not going to sit down. We're not going to keep taking this. Something has got to change. And they are raising their voice. They are getting out. They are activate. Their activism is so strong. And that's what brings me hope that that's the generation that has the power to change this. So.
From your mouth to God's ear. Dr. John, sitting there in your chair looking very doctorial.
Well, I'm relaxing.
Tell us how you arrive at this gathering. What's on your heart?
I think, like Stephen, I'm kind of disappointed because I'm one of the baby boomers of the 60s, and we were supposed to revolutionize and make things better for the world. We didn't like what our parents were doing. We called them just out of touch, and we were going to make it all right. And while there's some things that was for the good, it's that we made some steps forward, but we slid back. And it's always more difficult to recapture ground than to make new ground. And that's kind of where we are now. So we're worse off now in some ways because we have the illusion of some things that's good. But in actuality, de facto, we still have the same kind of Jim Crow system. And it's not just down south now. It's the de facto Jim Crow system nationwide. And while I had just given up on my generation, and I was questioning Generation X, Pam, I'm really happy again with the millennials. I see that spirit of the 60s in them to change things, that they're seeing what's happening. They're seeing the injustices in the system, the police department, in the schools, and especially where Blacks are concerned. With wearing my mental health hat as well as the pastor, I see a lot of grieving and a lot of parents. Some of the mental health situation that they're suffering is exacerbated by the agony they relive on the TVs and on the social media formats each day. And you'll be surprised how people who are prone to PTSD, anxiety, depression, how they go through those cycles and questioning where did they go wrong in some ways, questioning their very faith belief in God that this could still be happening. So I really am happy that we have this forum and others that's going to, I know we did that same thing with the Ministerial Alliance on last Saturday with the 6 feet on the street format, talking to people about that. And that's kind of what we need, and what we're doing now is coming together, helping people, and not taking folks for granted because we're in the positions that we do, that we don't suffer. And the mental health field, and in the medical and the health field, you'd be surprised how many of us are silent sufferers because we're so busy helping others. And that's, again, what we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of, is the providers as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I want to move the conversation to talk about COVID-19 as it continues across our communities. And I'd love to hear from all of you about how you have seen it impact those that you are working with. What about you, Darylyn? What kind of impacts have you seen?
So, so I provide individual therapy to students at Highline. And so as soon as it happened, we all went to, we use Zoom for our sessions. So, and what's been really happening, so a lot of my students already have like a lot of like trauma histories, as well as really suffer with anxiety and depression. And since COVID and being in the house, it's definitely increased a lot of more suicidal ideations. So a lot more de-escalation around that I've experienced. And it's been hard for me in the sense of, so a lot of my students live at home, and home isn't the safest place for them emotionally or physically. And so school and making sure they were getting involved with activities, actually coming and seeing me on campus or being at school, that those things gave them space to decrease the amount of time that they were at the house. And so it's been a challenge in trying to figure out how to create safe spaces for them when with COVID happening and there being a limited amount of space outside of the home that they're able to access. And then we have a lot of students. I have students who have home insecurities, where and food insecurity, where Highline has been helping with that, but with it, we're not actively like open in that way. So that's also been a challenge in trying to support students through this time. It's definitely impacted them, and me as their clinician, in trying to provide support to them.
I don't know how you do this, but I'm glad you do. Pam, I want you to jump in, because as Darylyn said, housing insecurity, food insecurity, and that makes me want to ask, how has COVID-19 impacted MDC and their clients?
Well, thank you for asking. And I do have a follow-up question for Darylyn after I respond, because what you said really, I was just imagining what it must be like for the students who you are providing services to, Darylyn. For MDC, it's been difficult, and there are aspects of our services that never stopped. Our inpatient services never stopped. So we have continued to provide the withdrawal management, also known as detox services, as well as our psychiatric evaluation and treatment services right there on site, because we recognize that behavioral health is just as important as physical health. And so I always applaud and give a shout out to our staff who have been there on site, as well as for our staff we've continued to provide the overnight sheltering at Bethlehem Baptist Church and our supportive housing services. However, it's still very different. And especially when you talk about, as Daryl Lynn mentioned, having to pivot from having a physical space where you meet your clients, and now your space is virtual. And that has, after a while, that really begins to take a toll, not only on the folks who are being served, but the folks who are doing the service, who are providing the service. And I was really just wondering, Daryl Lynn, how that has impacted you to now have a different way of engaging.
So initially, I thought it was just going to be terrible, like thinking about doing sessions just virtually. But I feel it's actually quite effective, more than I imagined. But what is different is my students thinking about, some of them don't feel comfortable turning on their cameras. And it's a different level of intimacy as well, because you're in their homes. And then they're in your home, even if it's an office, they're still here. And so I've adjusted in the sense of whenever I start a session, I'd ask them, do you want to do phone today or do you want to do camera? How are you feeling? And people will tell me if they want video or no video. Some of the students who I was seeing prior to COVID, I don't see them. I've called them, we've emailed, we've tried to connect, and they just aren't interested in this video way of connecting and doing therapy. But then I do have students now who I probably would have never seen, like even come into the counseling center, who I see via this way. So it's definitely a difference. And we also, before we went live from home, we did some training on like how what different modalities for providing mental health therapy, specifically using video conferencing. So that was helpful.
Great question, Pam. Really good question. Dr. Castile, how has COVID-19 affected those that you are working with?
Almost in similar ways. They were first uncomfortable with, again, what appeared to be an intrusion. Some felt abandoned, and we had to really work harder to kind of get them back into the system. I found too that people who are already struggling and had problems, they had a retreat where they can go to work or go to school or go to the park. But now they feel like they all just thrown together. And I've just seen mothers especially, their stress level is so great, they're having sometimes 2 cycles in a month because of the stress. The PMS is more severe than it had been before. And the kids are suffering with that too. So we're having to do some other kind of things with how we deal with family counseling and having to deal with the kind of stress of being thrown in the house. Of course, the financial piece that's added to it also. So they're concerned about what happens when it's over, they don't have a job, or what happens when it's over, they can't pay the rent. So it's a lot of other stresses that this bring about. So the domestic violence, it has increased. Substance abuse has increased. People still coping. So it's not just news when you see on TV a joke when you see the liquor stores, the lines long. pot stores, they're still trying to cope even more so with COVID-19 consequences. So we're seeing a lot of stuff. So I deal with them both clinically and faith-based pastoral counseling. It's the same thing. And so they feel like they can't even come to the church for the kind of support. And so they don't have the kind of counseling system that the scheduled clients do clinically. So we're having to really mobilize some of these team members to kind of begin to reach out and do things. And we're doing stuff in the church, like with the kind of, not only in the live interview streaming on Sunday, but we're having to do that with the members in their home because they're going through the kind of personal crisis. So it's opening up a whole new arena of what we're looking at and dealing with issues. And that's just a few. We haven't gotten in some of the youth themselves, the substance abuse itself. That's just some of it. It's just been a matter of crisis intervention.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephen, you're a life coach, and then you are also an adjunct counselor at local community colleges, and you're also on the faculty at Tacoma School of the Arts. So I'm imagining you've got 3 different audiences that you kind of work with. So of those audiences, how have you seen COVID-19 affect them?
Well, so for the college, I'm teaching a summer course, so that hasn't started yet. So with that class, I haven't seen the effects yet. However, in the high school, things that I'm seeing is, again, home insecurities, food insecurities, connectivity issues. Depression was already high in school, but it's even heightened now because they're at home all the time with their parents. The parents are stressed out because they don't know how to help the students with any of the schoolwork. The students paralyzed with lack of motivation to even do the schoolwork because, again, they're dealing with the depression, they're dealing with the family issues. Some of them are having to watch their siblings all the time now, so they're thrust into the parent role as well. And so, they're not sleeping. So I talk with a lot of students and they're like, they sleep all day because they're up all night. And so again, trying to help them get into and find routines and structure for themselves, but is very difficult for them because if you can imagine, they went from a structured environment to an unstructured environment. And again, even with the adults, the parents are struggling. And so again, it's creating tension within the home. Some students have left the home and went and are staying other places because of the conflict at home. And so it creates a very interesting balance there. With my life coaching clients, again, the frustration of, their structure has been thrown off now because not only am I an adult and the structure for my work environment, but now I have to learn how to try to teach my children, and I don't know this information. And so again, it's so much that people are dealing with. So depression is very high right now. Depression and anxiety. In regular school, those were the top 2 things that I would see on a daily basis. Being a social worker, some kids, the anxiety was so high that some kids couldn't even come to school. Like parents would drive them to school, but their anxiety because of what's going on in the household is so high that they couldn't even get out the car to come to school. And so again, you're dealing with that, and now they're completely inundated with that environment.
Wow, that was beautifully sectioned out. My goodness.
So Amanda, I'd like to weigh in. Everything that we've heard so far is what we thought we would hear as we were identifying topics to cover in Straight Talk. We knew that we were going to have a conversation about behavioral health, that it is very much a critical and a necessary conversation to have, right? And so everything that you all have said just really, it articulates what we thought we would be hearing. And now we are in a space where there's an intersection of COVID, pandemic, being at home, being isolated from one another. And we have this very stark intersection of racism. Like no one, you can't script something like this.
Right.
And the impact, I'm just really curious how you all are watching this through your clinical eyes, what's happening now.
Well, from the very beginning, when we found out schools were going to be closed, I knew this was coming. I knew, you know, one of the things I said is the after effects of all of this is going to create a lot more trauma. Because, you know, when you're dealing with families that don't know if they're going to have a job or if they're not going to, you know, be able to stay in their same home, you know, those stressors are going to trickle down to our students. And so again, the things that our students are already feeling, that's only compounded now. And really, so now it's you know, and oftentimes I get emails from other students, can you check in on this, you know, on this student? Because what they are texting me or what I'm seeing, they're not doing good. And so again, you know, just trying to reach out to them, trying to, you know, be a glimmer of hope, trying to help them, you know, or just be a voice to ear to listen to what they're going through, because again, they are stuck in it, and a lot of families are gonna come out worse than what they were going into this.
I think probably in addition to that piece of it, addressing that economic fear of what's going to happen, and you can't think that the kids don't feel that pressure and sense that pressure also. And then the clients, depending on what the nature of that mental health disorder, it's compounded then when they look at where they are in the sense that the fear that the whole nation is shut down. Mm-hmm. And then they say, you know, in the fall, it's gonna get worse. So people they don't have, it's like you got that sense of hopelessness now, collectively and individually. And I think that's kind of the piece that, talking about this, eliminating some of the unknowns and helping them to deal with some of the knowns. And that's kind of what I've had to do with families, helping them to understand some of the outbursts and why it happens. Why mom used to look like an angel, but she wasn't home every day, but now she's home every day. And moms have learned to appreciate teachers a lot more and can't wait for school to start again. But then they don't know when school is going to start again. So people react to that very, very traumatically. And so those kind of traumas is creating a new normal of what we're going to be seeing in the schools, in the colleges, in the treatment centers, in the work site. I think that a big piece of what we're going to do and have to learn is just beginning. I suspect also that video conferencing is probably going to become that new normal that people are talking about. I just can't see it going away with what we've had to do to implement that, and I'm hoping it won't go away. And what we've had to do to implement that has really been effective, especially when people can't get around. So it's still kind of address some of the folks beyond outside of Corona that struggle with transportation, out of compliance due to lack of attendance. So we're looking at some of the positives from Corona. So it's some good and some bad. I just think our system is it will never go back. I don't feel it will go back to the way it was, because Corona has made such a tremendous impact on every aspect of our society.
When I think of those intersections you spoke of, so like all these different, things that are going on, I also think of the intersections of our clients' identities, right? And so in my work, I really work hard to create a space where all of whoever that person is can be in the room. So that's like their gender, their race, ethnicity, their relationship, like literally everything, all of that can come in the room. And what I'm learning or seeing with my clients now is that there's another, like we always talk about race, we always talk about social identity and how that impacts even the way they experience depression, even like the way they experience trauma, historical trauma. We talk about that. And now what I see is more of my students who are not Black students. So I'm hearing more conversations from my white students, a lot more conversations from like Asian students, and Asian students particularly identifying more as people of color and experiencing racism in their mind for the first time. And so having to talk with them about what that is. So I've been doing a more education around like racial identity development, way more education around what whiteness is. Like a client said, I really want you to teach me how not to hate white people. I said, girl, I ain't got nothing for you. Like, that's not what we can talk about is whiteness. We can hate whiteness, right? And we can talk about what that is and what you're feeling and give you language to be able to process that. So we talked about that. So I see these intersections of where people who may not have felt comfortable or even have the language to identify in a strong way, see that those identities are really impacting their mental health and looking to be able to talk about it. So when I think about practice and what I'm committed to in my practice is creating a space where that is okay, where you are welcome to bring those conversations and have them, because that is definitely, in the way that I look at it, a direct link to our emotional health and stability. To be able to, and also encourage them to read, right? So especially when we talk about racism and we talk about the implications of racism on our society, the systemic way in which people of color, Black people, are negatively impacted by anything, right? This is not the first time. So if you can read, it gives you a little bit of distance and to see, I'm not the first person to feel this. I'm not the first person to experience this. And so what have other people said about this time? And what can I learn moving forward? So that I think that's been something that has been happening more with my clients because of all these intersections coming forth.
I want to remind our listening audience as we sit here and just marvel in the brilliance of this panel. If you have any questions that you'd like to pose, go ahead and pose those through our Q&A, and Rob is standing by to get them funneled to me. So, Pam, let's shift a bit to George Floyd. So I want to ask the whole group, what changes are you seeing and hearing in the wake of the death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers and the ensuing protests that have continued across our communities?
So Amanda, your question to me is specifically what?
What changes are you hearing and seeing that have happened since we've all woke up after the death of George Floyd? And what are you seeing in terms of these protests as they continue across our communities? You know, you all have said that it feels different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that?
Mm-hmm. I'll try to put into words why I sense that it feels different after I say this is what I am seeing, both in our local community and around the world. What we are seeing now is not just the reaction to yet again a Black man dying at the hands of police. And it is not just the reaction to it being videoed. It is the combination of yet again an unarmed Black man dying while being videoed, and the person who killed him nonchalantly kept his knee on his neck. And this time, the entire world can see it. And again, that length of time especially says everything that words don't need to be uttered. And what we are seeing now is our community rising up to say, and our world saying, America, you've been trying to move along as though what you have done to Black people really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It really does matter. And so, America, what are you going to do with this big mess that you have? Because the whole world is watching. That's why it feels different. And when I see that people are protesting and expressing themselves in whatever way they are protesting and expressing themselves, I have a way of expressing myself and protesting, and it may not look like somebody else's way of expressing themselves and protesting, but it's a protest. There are things I don't condone, but I do condone the protest. And I think if we don't, because I want to bring it back to this conversation, if we don't express our protest, I think we will all just lose our minds. And I think as we transition post-pandemic, we all need the support of one another, no matter how we identify, how we've stepped into this space. We're all going to need, we're gonna need the Daryl Lynn's and Stevens and Dr. Castillos of the world to help us.
I think back that some of the seeds of racism is the perceived sense of threat and search for survival. And I recall when they had the Civil Rights Bill, they were saying that Blacks are just taking over the jobs and taking over college slots. And then when they had affirmative action, they were saying that women are taking over the jobs. And you know, and then it goes on. And this is what especially poor whites were feeling and fed and led to believe. And I think now they're talking about the state is talking about possibly furloughing people and other things, but and other agencies that might closing down and reducing staff when it's over. So it's going to be some more of that fear. If you think you see the economic fear now, the people that are out marching together now, if we don't do this right, can have us kind of fighting over the crumbs. And I think this is where Stephen and Daryl and you guys working with the schools, especially have a big job on your hand, educating the people and even in the counseling field throughout, that we don't succumb to what that bad piece of history that we went down before. If as predicted, it gets worse again in the fall, America is going to really be in some big trouble. And as the racial fears are stoked during the November election season, as we get closer, we are going to really have to do some educating and making sure we don't stay silent. And I just want to support the young folk, especially, that they can continue to be empowered to keep doing. But we adults got to really see what happened in the past, and not let ourselves again get back to that point where we allowed the system to divide and conquer again, using racism as a tool.
I know. I once heard a man say that the Black experience in America is like being in a domestic violence relationship. Again, this is the I'm sorry part. That's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
But something else is coming.
Right.
And it feels like a fad that, you know, all these corporations and everyone is saying, you know, we need to do something about white supremacy. But again, these are things we already knew.
Right.
But they were comfortable of the status quo, of letting it be that way. And so I know when I check in with my students, they're traumatized.
Yes.
They're traumatized of having to see people that look like them on national TV or on social media, the life being taken out of them by the ones who are supposed to be sworn to serve and protect. I saw a picture, and I just want you all to have this image. I saw a picture the other day of a young Black girl, and she was holding a sign that says, you kill our fathers, and then you ridicule us for not having one. I mean, sit with that, because I watched that in the education world. You know, I watched that in the education sector where people talk about single parent children and children of no fathers. And it's almost, again, it's they're being ridiculed for, like, that's their fault by some way. And so again, our students are traumatized because each one of our students can see, you know, their father, their uncle, their brother, their friend being in that situation or themselves. And for my female students also, they're feeling like they're invisible because Breonna Taylor doesn't get that much attention, right? Her life is kind of just like brushed over because, you know, we have the next one. And so it is very difficult for them to, and so one of the things that I try to check in with them and encourage them and remind them, number one, this is not your fault. This has absolutely nothing to do with you doing anything wrong or Black people doing anything wrong. This is a white supremacist nature. And so we have to understand where this evil is coming from. This has absolutely nothing to do with you, but it's important for them to be able to express themselves and be able to talk about it, because some of them can't talk about it at home. Their parents are they're traumatized that I don't even know what to say to my child right now as they're going through their hurt. I'm feeling my own hurt, so I don't even know how to help them. And so being able to give them space for them to share their voice, and I encourage them to share, to get it off of them, because I don't want you to hold on to that trauma without being able to get it out. I don't want you to suppress those emotions, those feelings, because that's what a lot of them are doing. And I've seen a number of videos, and I've had these conversations with people that said, well, you know, if they would only not act like this. I said, well, here's the thing. You have to understand the public is not trained. Law enforcement is supposed to be trained at de-escalation. The public is not trained. You're expecting young people to already be mature adults in this situation where we know that people of power can do things to bait a kid into a situation that they can predict the outcome. And now when the kid reacts, now I look justified at whatever I did to them. But I'm the one that initiated, I instigated the whole event that caused them to get there. And so that anger is real. That anger that people have that's built in of watching time after time after time and no justice. And James Baldwin says this. He said, children have never disappointed at not listening to their elders, but they have never failed at imitating them. And when I say that as adults, we have to live to a higher standard, but in our country, we expect our youth to live to a higher standard than what the adults are living to. Law enforcement is expecting the public to be at a higher standard than what they are modeling, and they are sworn to serve and protect. They are trained at this. And so again, you know, these are the things that we have to be able to give them space for that voice, allow that anger to come out. Allow that anger to come out, because a lot of them are dying on the inside. And so we have to give them that space. We have to be that ear to allow them to express themselves and not criticize them for the way they express the anger. But now we can coach and mold it. But we have to allow that to come out.
I agree with that a lot. Like, what feels different for me since Mr. Floyd's death, it reminds me of Dr. King's 3 evils that he spoke about, right? So about poverty, racism, and then militarization.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in my lifetime, I haven't been able to like see all of these together in this time. And I feel like that's what feels different, at least when that feels different for me. The poverty piece, I think COVID-19 has really, obviously, right? So people don't have their jobs, people are at home. People are feeling closer to this, maybe people who never thought that they would be, have home insecurity or food insecurity are now on that verge of feeling what it feels like to be in a marginalized group for the very first time, and how quickly that can change, right? And it starts to impact ideas of privilege, of being better, and like, wow, like that quick, this can change for me. And then we see this militarization of police in our communities. We see it in the way that they're responding to protests and to some rioters, right? And then racism, it just doesn't go away. It's still here. And specifically anti-Black racism. I think people are comfortable talking about people of color, and even listening to you, Steve, talk about like the youth. It's specifically Black youth, right? Like I think people are beginning to talk a little bit more about what it means to be anti-Black racist, and that there's a difference, and it is rooted deep in our history. And so for me, all 3 of these things are just very prevalent, and just is why it feels different for me. and why I think there's a lot more people questioning and speaking up who maybe not have spoke up before. Both Black, people of color, white people who thought differently, like, and realizing like, wow, this system, I'm a part of it and it is terrible.
Yeah.
And it can impact my life in a very real way, right? And so that's what feels different. And definitely speaking on anti-Blackness, because that is real and that is at the root of these things that sometimes people just, we brush by it so we don't have to talk about it. So yeah, I think that feels different for me. And sitting with my clients and then with myself, like, yeah, so.
Mm-hmm.
So the weightiness of this issue is evident, of the intersection of all of these issues is evident. And I guess I would ask you all, as clinicians, what do you do to take care of yourselves? What do you do?
For me, definitely, again, talking about it is important. And I have a number of friends or colleagues that I can, just have honest conversations, and just honestly express how I feel, because that's important. How I feel is real. I think taking those times to do the self-care that I normally practice anyway, because again, you have to be able to take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, I'm no good for anyone else. And so self-care is a regular practice that I do, of really just taking that still, quiet time for myself, being able to have my moments to where I can just shut everything off and engage with me and remind myself that I'm all right, I'm doing all right. And remind myself of the hopefulness that I have in spite of what's going on, and remind myself that you had nothing to do with this evil that's going on, this evil that we are seeing in this world. This is not a proponent of what your people has done. This is evil that was planned. It was orchestrated from the very beginning of this country. And so again, the self-care is so valuable, and I teach that to my students. You have to, something that you care about, something that you enjoy doing, something that you can just steal away from the rest of the world. And whatever that looks like for you, whether that's reading, whether that's meditating, whether that's prayer, whatever that is, you have to do that, but you have to do it consistently and regularly. Because if you don't, it can easily get away from you. And especially with all this going on right now, it's easily get consumed and overwhelmed. And you see just like bad thing after bad thing, like it's like bad stuff, this foot is on the gas right now, and it's not letting up. And so to be able to, just have that, some of the things I suggest to my students is connect with others. Just give yourself time. It doesn't have to be about education. It doesn't have to be about anything else. Just give yourself time to connect. Encourage yourself through this process, because you got to encourage yourself as you're going through it. Find routines that are helpful for you, right? Like, one of the things I tell my students is, listen, I don't care whether you sleep all night, whether you sleep all day, stay up all night. If you're going to do some schoolwork, maybe do it in 30-minute sections. Give yourself 30 minutes. Don't try to do everything at once. Give yourself 30 minutes, and then give yourself an hour of fun time, something that you enjoy. and break it up, because you still have to have fun in between that. Because if it's all work, again, it gets paralyzing that I got so much to do that I don't even know where to start. And that's where a lot of them are at. They're paralyzed, that they don't even start any of it. Because, so I tell you got to get your routine. Reach out when you feel like you're going down into that hole. You got to reach out for that lifeline. Relax. Read something every now and then, and just some stuff that you get for enjoyment for yourself. And then give yourself grace for even when you don't do everything that you had planned to do, or you give yourself some grace that, you know what, so what, I did not do it today, I'll start tomorrow. And we have to get to that place of self-care has to become a regular regiment, because if not, we're just in knee-jerk reaction mode. When things happen, now I gotta try to lose weight. Or when this happened, it has to become a lifestyle change. That self-care becomes a regular regiment that I do. And that's one of the things that I try to get my students to do. I try to get the staff at the school to do, because they're also going through it. The teachers, the educators, they're also going through it at the same time. And so again, trying to get people to really think about and process and build in a regular self-care routine.
I think also, especially being a Black man, I didn't believe in counseling at first. And I didn't believe in somebody, and at that time it would have been a white man also, giving my money to somebody to tell me how to run my life. And and some of my best clients are some of those clients who are still old school like that. And I just make it a point when I'm talking to people and I'm telling them, I have three fingers pointing back at me to remind me of, if I'm telling them how to deal with stress and how to not let anger get to them, I have to remind me, because sometimes there's some client remind me of some other experience in my life, and I get triggered myself. Or something happened on TV, like this recent case. It get triggered, and I find myself becoming angered with things and with the system and how unjust it is, and how a two-term Vietnam veteran went overseas to fight for somebody else's freedom. And I've got to come back in a little bit crap like this, and here's the 2020. And if I let myself keep going with that, I can really get going. I ain't talking about preaching on it either. So I have to remind myself two things. One is my faith is what sustained me. And my faith is what got me out of Vietnam safely. And my faith is in prayer is what got me out of a stroke. And I just believe in that same faith that this is still one nation under God. I believe that. I just believe that God is going to let us happening. God's going to let us run ourselves into something. But somebody said on Facebook that this God's spanking us, putting us in time out, making us stay home. At the same time, the beauty of that is people are becoming family again. They're having to deal with each other. When I'm talking about that to other people, I'm reminded how blessed I am. So I don't let myself dwell on the negative. I have to continue to address those things, but I got to move forward on the positive note, and that's what I want to pass on to others. If I start dealing on stuff that's hopeless because it hasn't changed, that's gonna perpetuate the feeling of helplessness. I'm like what Stephen just said. It hasn't happened. It didn't happen, but it hasn't happened yet. It's still tomorrow, and those small things make a big difference. And then I have to say one other thing too. Then I'm through. I promise I won't preach. But my Bible teaches me that, and I listen to that when David cried out, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And yea, though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." And Jesus said, "Let not your heart be troubled." Between those three verses, I just have my solid base, and God has given me all of these years in life that I don't have to have proof anymore. I know he's real. I feel him. And that is the spirit of hope and joy that I want to pass on to others. So that's kind of what helps me is helping others. I can't help folks if I don't help myself. So I thank you, Pam, for inviting me to be on this, be able to part of the sharing. And if I could, outside of this capacity, if I could be of any other service to anybody on here, don't hesitate to call me. Thank you.
I believe that. I like the belief that like God is on the side of justice is very helpful, and that the arc of justice is long, right? And so that it gives me hope. But thinking of me as a Black woman, and in this position as therapy, I give myself permission to lament. I give myself permission to cry, to feel weak, to be upset, to have these feelings without judgment on, does that mean I'm not strong enough? Does that mean I'm not saved enough? Do I not have enough faith? It's like, no, I'm actually just a human, and I get to be that. As a strong Black woman, I get to cry.
Thank you.
And creating space for myself to do that and reminding myself to do that. That's something I'm very intentional about in terms of my own self-care. I have probably taken more hot baths in the last 2 weeks than I've taken in my lifetime. Used up all of my Epsom salt, all my lavender. I go glove up and go get some more. That's very intentional around that. And then I think about what other things that are new to me. Being intentional about my space in my house, because the world is so unsafe, because it does not feel validating and affirming. My house is that place for me and for my husband. And so being very intentional about being love, giving love, making love, like this is my house, my sanctuary, my space, and being intentional about maintaining that space. Done that. And I have a therapist. I will never not have a therapist. So I talk to my therapist all the time. Well, not all the time because she's expensive, but I talk to her when we're scheduled for sessions. And I don't watch all the videos. I really try to limit my time on social media. I didn't watch the video of Mr. Floyd, and I won't watch it. I don't even like to watch the images. Like, so being protective over being comfortable or being forced to watch Black men die, to being forced to watch Black men be murdered. I'm very intentional around that space. And I'm very intentional around, I'm not trying to teach white people on what they need to do. I think that there's enough of information out there, and Google is an awesome place to start, where that people can access the information they need without asking me to bleed for them, to do the labor for them. And I think I'm very intentional around that, around my self-care. Now, if it's a client, I got to, because that's that space. But in my personal, my time, my energy is, I give myself the permission to breathe. Like, right, so I have been meditating, doing deep breathing, as not only an affirmation of life, like, so like, I think about it in the term of like, when God breathed into me, he breathed, and that's how I became alive. So it's an affirmation of my humanity, the affirmation of divinity that created me. And there's also this act of resistance, because that is what's actually being taken from Black bodies, is the breath, is being able to breathe. And it's the first thing that's impacted when we experience trauma, anxiety, depression, our ability to breathe in a way that sustains us and calms us. And so I'm intentional about my breath because I deserve it. And so many people say that we don't, right? Like, to rest, to be intentional about rest as a Black person is resistance. For people who were a commodity, for people who were slaves, who had to rest in private so they wouldn't be seen as lazy, I breathe, and I'm intentional about it. And setting boundaries with my clients, If you miss your session, you can't email me. I'm about to read all that. We will talk about that during the next session. So those are the things that I'm very intentional about. Some of them are new since Mr. Floyd's death, or his murder, but those are the things that are helping me. And then choosing where I want to speak. What is my protest going to be like? And I don't have to sacrifice my body. My ancestors did enough of that. COVID is still outside. So y'all gotta take that. Like, I don't have to do that. There's other things that I can do. And this is one of them. And being available to serve people and help people is another one. Calling, there's more than one. I don't have to sacrifice my body anymore. My ancestors have done it. So that's my self-care spiel.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
So it's as you were talking, Darylyn, your mouth to somebody in the audience, you stirred something. And here's the question. And this question's for the whole panel to answer. The question is, my staff and I have noticed that we need to set boundaries on how much news we watch, Bing, and how much time we spend on social media. Also, some of us are grieving regarding expectations that have been blown to bits regarding family and friends. What do we say to them?
I think
two things. Setting boundaries. It should focus on what works for me and what works against me. And I need to know why I'm on Facebook at 2 in the morning when I got to go to work tomorrow morning at 8, and knowing that that's going to be a full day, but yet still this happens day after day. So that's we need to set some boundaries, and then I need to start looking at getting some help to address that. If I'm doing this by choice because I want to and I suffer, well, that's some things we got to watch out also, because you might not know, you might be still violating good, healthy boundaries and not being aware of it. So we need to help them to see how boundaries work for you, not just against you. Boundaries are not setting up a prison wall, but boundaries help you to maintain that safe space, a healthy space, and it helps others. When you set boundaries, it helps you to know what to tolerate and what not to. So you're doing things that's going to help you to become more empowered. So just helping them understand their purpose for boundaries, and then they can determine that from case to case where healthier boundaries may need to be established, as opposed to somebody saying, you got to do this, you got to do that. We might need to teach what boundaries are and why, but then they have to decide how they want to establish those boundaries to bring about that desired need that they have.
Yeah, and grief is real, and it is experienced, and you experience grief for a lot of different reasons. And in this time, there is a lot of unrest that happens when you expected somebody to be a certain way. They were your friends, y'all grew up together, they came to your house for barbecue, all sorts of things, and now you hear them say like all lives matter for the first time or something, and that hits you in a very different way, right? I think that it's okay to just talk about that and just to name it for what it is. It's a paradigm shift. It's reestablishing relationships and friends. And it can be painful, right? There's some relationships that you can try to come together, like you evaluate the benefit of that relationship. Is that helping me, or is that like no longer helping me, right? Exactly. Same thing with boundaries, right? We're having that same conversation about relationships. What is it how invested am I in this relationship? And if it's one that is pretty significant and there is room to like grow, then it may be worth like doing a few breaths and getting in there and having conversations about, you know, this is what I need in our friendship, or this is what I need in our relationship, and then give them the opportunity to make adjustments if they have the capacity. So if you do that and then they don't have the capacity to make those adjustments for what works for you, what you need in a healthy relationship, and sometimes you do have to separate. And if that occurs, it has to be your decision, right?
Mhm.
It has to be something that's true for you, that's real for you, and you make that decision. And if it occurs, then also give yourself the space to grieve that loss. Because just because the relationship's over or we've now found out that it's not beneficial doesn't mean it hasn't ever served a purpose, right? And so being able to grieve that and find people that can hold that with you, whether that be a professional or whether that be some other friend or family or pastor or whoever, to be able to walk you through that space. And if it's specifically around like there's specific groups out there that you can find, if it's specific around like race and like whiteness, around like you becoming more aware of what it means to live in white skin in the United States and wanting to do stuff around that. So like finding groups that can help affirm even your journey.
So you're talking about affinity groups?
Thank you. I couldn't figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen, I want to let you get a breath in there because we are almost out of time, and I could just see you tracking, wanting to get in there. So it's yours.
Well, you know, I have this saying that my mind is my remote control, and no one can change my channel unless I give them the remote. So if I choose to be happy, I don't care what you do to me. I get to control the emotion that I feel. You could do something that's going to, you know, make life uncomfortable for me, but still, at the end of the day, I get to choose the emotion that I choose to feel. I say control the variable that you can control, is that's you. So I control me. Anything outside my realm that I have no control over, I can't control whether it's going to rain tomorrow, so why am I going to worry about that? I'm not going to worry about things that I have absolutely no control over. So I focus on what can I control. I can control me. I can control how I choose to feel and what I choose to do. And my boundaries, right. Like Dr. Castile said, boundaries are so important and so healthy, to have healthy boundaries. You know, even at my job, most places that I've worked, they've known that what my work hours are, that's what my work hours are. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing anything extra, because if I do extra, then you're going to expect extra. You're going to expect if I'm here for an 8-hour shift and this day I choose and I work 10 hours, well, now that I've worked 10 hours, you may expect me to work 11. So therefore, no, my boundaries are this, and I'm going to hold true to my boundaries, because at the end of the day, it's about me at this point. That's the contract we had. Good. And so I'm going to honor the part of my contract. I'm going to give you 110% while I'm there. Mm-hmm. But when I'm not there, my family is more important. And how, you know, that would be criminal of me to take time away from my family to do this work over here, then I'm cheating my family. The reason why I am going out and I am helping and I am working in the field is because, hey, I have to make a living for my family. And so I have to be present there. But through all of that, I have to be a product of the product. I have to be what people are seeing in me, because that's who I am. I have to be authentic. I'm authentically Black. I am not going to constrain myself for anyone, because this is who I am. And if you can't accept me for who I am, then I'm not for you. Right? Because the reality is, so many people do have mental illness because we are trying to live up to everybody else's expectations. Mm-hmm. We're trying to meet, and the reality is we will never be able to please everyone.
That's right.
And so at the end of the day, when I put my head on the pillow at night, I want to know that I did God's work, number one, that as long as he's pleased with me, I'm pleased. Whatever I did not accomplish today is waiting for me tomorrow. I am not going to stress and worry about what did not get done today because tomorrow's coming.
Amen.
So
That's good.
Can I add to that? That I really, I hope that we can stress that everybody isn't as strong, right? And everybody doesn't have the same capacity, and that environmental factors are real when we talk about mental health, but biological, right? And especially when we're talking about historical trauma and the impact that has on us from a cellular level.
mm-hmm.
Right? And so to hold space for that and to really think about, a lot of times we just don't give ourselves a space to not be strong. And that the way that you heal is to actually have space to lament, to lament, to cry, to get through so that you can go on. Like Jesus wept, right? It's like, but not us, right? Like, so to be mindful that lamenting and being able to process and grieve, like what that person said, that they're experiencing a lot of grief. I'm holding that with you because it's painful and it's hard, and time doesn't always make it better unless we learn how to go through it in a particular type of way. Grief just left unattended to, not cried over, not processed, just becomes bigger and harder. So time alone doesn't heal it all. We have to be active in order to address it. So for the person to answer that question, I just want to give them space to know, like, you're right, it's heavy, it's hard. And the first step is for you just naming it and acknowledging it, providing that space for yourself and for others to get through it over time because you're engaged in it.
And one other point too, what we've said, I think what we have said is giving, here's a lot of the what. And Darren, you mentioned earlier, you got to give yourself permission.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to, and I'm hoping more panel discussion will come to teach people how to give themselves permission. The self-esteem level, Stephen, that you mentioned, I'm going to be okay whether you like me or not. You might cause me some grief, but I'm going to be okay. We got to teach people how to maintain that healthy, positive level of self-esteem and the importance of setting boundaries. I think, Amanda, you mentioned, one of you mentioned that we can't tell people to leave a bad relationship, but we can tell them to set boundaries and get away from the abuse. And they can choose to get away from that behavior or the person if that's what it takes. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping, Pam, that and Rob, maybe the next thing that we focus on is maybe get into some of the steps on how to do some of those things. My little comment on it.
Pam, you want to take us home?
Yes. I did not expect that a byproduct of this conversation would be how much I would be blessed by listening to you all. I just knew, and Twina and I knew as we were weeks ago talking about the things that we would need to cover, the topics that we had to talk about behavioral health, specifically mental health. And it was, again, extremely evident in the wake of everything that has been happening just the past 2 weeks, how important it is that we have this conversation. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those part one and part twos, Amanda and Twina, that we have to come back because we've talked about like all of the things that make this so weighty. And to hear the analogy, Dr. Castile, that to be Black in America is like being in a DV situation, just wow, that just did something. It stirred something in my psyche like that had never been impacted before. The beauty is hearing how all of you speak about how you create space intentional space to care for yourself and giving yourself permission to just take a step back, or to acknowledge I feel weak, or to mourn, to grieve, and how critical that is. And I think that's a very important message for all of us in the space that we are in now, all of us, that we have to acknowledge where we are. And I just say thank you so much on behalf of MDC and on behalf of the Urban League. We just thank you. We appreciate you so much. We hope that we can bring you back together again so that we could talk about part 2. Here are some very specific things that anyone can do, and here are some resources that are available to folks so that people can get the help that they need. So thank you again. We appreciate you all for joining the panel, and we thank everyone who participated, who sat in and watched this conversation. Thanks again, and everybody have a good night.